and she was talking mostly to new board members, that if, she said to them, if you're a board that has board member comments on your agenda, don't take them off now, and you know, and there was some questions or discussion about it, but, so, there wasn't a whole lot of, I couldn't remember why, or she didn't talk a lot about why they made that suggestion, so I told you I'd follow up with her, but I called her, and basically what she said is that, that she and Sally, I was about to say Howell, that's not her last name anymore, is it? Smith. Whenever they speak about this, they strongly discourage it, and probably partly because of that, there are hardly any boards that still do it anymore. She said there are a few, but so she said to those boards that are just adamant to keep it on the agenda, she recommends to, I forgot what she called it. She called it commendations. But anyway, so I asked her why, and she said that basically it opens the door for something to be brought up that hasn't been vetted ahead of time, and basically could expose the board. And so she kind of gave me some examples of things she's seen in other systems, and I said, well, I don't think we really have that happening here. And she said that the best time to fix it is now, while it's not a problem, or as new board members come on and off, that it's a standard operating procedure. And she kind of told some examples of where they've seen that, just the opportunity for that. So basically it just, if there are items that need to be discussed, they need to be added to the agenda. That way everybody knows ahead of time and has an opportunity to prepare. That was what her suggestion was, but she said they strongly discourage that, so I'm just reporting back about that. And I shared it because she made such a, actually they may have said it in the trainings y'all attended, she did make a big...
Well, how we take it off, just tell them to take it off, and we have to vote on it.
Well, we prepare the agendas, so...
Well, and I did a phone conversation with her also.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and mine was today, so it followed up basically with what you had done. And I was asking that very same question because, you know, Daryl was the one who asked for us to put it on there, and I agree, because at the very beginning when we were talking about adding comments on there, we were setting our agenda, and we were a board that had not had work sessions like we were having now. So really at the board table, we did not have an opportunity to make comments. So adding those comments at the end seemed like a very good idea. But now we have our work sessions where we have tons of comments.
You and I talked to Susan.
Yes.
So did what I say, did she share virtually the same thing?
Exactly the same. That's why I was able to plug in that little word accommodations for you there. Okay, so when I asked, well, what do we do? You know, because we are sharing these, you know, normally positive comments, but yet she was stressing, you know, these really should come off right now while it's a positive thing, because if you wait until there is a problem and you try taking them off then it becomes more of an issue. What she suggested was at the very beginning of our meetings when we do recognitions, and Dr. Spivey is up here and she recognizes students, faculty members, whoever she does for you know, for whatever awards or whatever kind of recognitions that we have, then our board president could simply at that time ask, are there any other recognitions? Are there any comments? And at that point, and I think she's discouraging the word comment also, but when he asks, are there any other recognitions, then that's an open door for us then to say, I would like to thank. And because basically, that's what we've been doing at the very end. We've been thanking people for whatever.
So what's the difference between putting it at the first of the meeting versus the last of the meeting?
Because when we do it at the very first, it sort of flows with everything that's going on.
Well, it's locked into recognitions too.
How locked is that talk?
As opposed to just
Comment
open
can be any kind
comments.
of comment.
Did she give you examples of what has gone wrong in other places? She listed several,
She
and no
did.
sense in going into that, but I told her we haven't had that happen. And so I let her know that there's not an issue. I said, you just made such an issue of making sure the board members heard that, and I repeated it, and they wanted to know why, so I'm asking why. And she gave enough examples where I was thinking, well, you would not ever want that to happen.
Well, the media has, I feel like, misconstrued some of our comments in the past.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I think the work sessions have definitely relieved some of the need for this, because frankly, the comments were being made anyway. They were just being made during the other parts of the meeting, which was more inappropriate. So this gives each board member an opportunity to say their piece. They know they're gonna get the opportunity, so they don't have to try to squeeze it in somewhere else. Your time is coming, you know, and so you know you're gonna get there. It works better to me at the end of the meeting, because there may be some things that you just didn't think of, but the meeting kind of brought it out. You know, it's not necessarily a place for board business, but you are an elected official and answers to the public, and sometimes I think that gives you a right, not an obligation to, you know, to speak every now and then. I do think the work sessions have made it less needed than what it was, definitely. I'm not sure that it's such a liability that we need to do away with it, though.
Well, I think if you keep it, according to what they said, you need to change the wording from comments to commendation or
But it is, what's the
extra other recommendations, because you really, I might be on some kind of medicine or something like that, you know, comment, you know?
But, you know, if that's the case, you're gonna say it anyway.
You know, oh, you're not gonna give me a chance.
Yeah, I think what she was cautioning about was that you might make, you know, or any of us may make a comment as a board member where we have not gathered the correct information or the correct facts, and we make that comment with incorrect information. The press is sitting here, and then someone else who has not had the opportunity to research or vet that information as we're supposed to do responds to it. So then we have all sorts of misinformation that's getting out there. And that becomes the problem.
She mentioned that can happen with people intending for it to happen, you know, which again, we don't have that going on here, but it happens. And it can happen, she said, unintentionally, like someone can think that they're making a perfectly innocent comment or asking a perfectly innocent question. They don't know, because there would be no reason for them to know. So it's a kind of a protection for the board members. And all I'm doing, we haven't had a problem with it. So, but if reading my responsibilities, even according to ASB, when I hear something like that, and I think if we have any kind of exposure, is to pass it along. And she was adamant and restated that, I guess, to both of us. So I'm passing it along.
You know, it's almost kind of like trying to legislate common sense. I mean, and we have, I struggle with ASB sometimes too, because the people who make the recommendations actually have never been a board member in most cases.
I think,
And there is a difference in the position that the board member holds as opposed to the superintendent or the administrative person.
I think where she's coming from a like procedural standpoint is, if there ever was an issue, that it would put the board president, whoever's in charge of the meeting, in a position of being able to call someone back into order, rather than if you've got open comments, then you've got on the agenda that somebody can talk until they stop talking, and so.
And I kind of see that, but I would not necessarily be opposed if y'all think it needs to be changed to taking it off of the voting meetings, the regular meetings. I would disagree with taking it off of the work sessions.
I agree with that.
You know, and we get most of our comments out in the work sessions anyway, but sometimes you'll have something that you want to mention to everyone that's not necessarily in the work session agenda, as long as it's reasonable and you're recognized by the chair. And I'm not big on calling everybody out doing that. You know, I think that's sufficient. And just because someone says something that you disagree with or fires you up, but you might not be ready to comment on it, doesn't mean you have to respond. You know, it's all right just to sit there and not make a comment, you know. That's where I get at with the trying to legislate common sense. I mean, you know, we sometimes get so busy in the things you can't do. I don't want us to get so restrictive that we don't do what we want to do.
If we do what you just suggested and pull it off the board meetings, I think we could pull board member and superintendent comments off, and for the most part, like the things I've got to mention tonight in comment portions are some just reminders, quick reminders that aren't really an agenda item, but I can do those in different ways or work them in other places, or just do those at work sessions. So we could even, not just the board comments, but that whole section entirely, leave it on work session and take it off of, I mean, whatever y'all want to do.
The other, if you really wanted, if you still wanted to keep it tightened up, the procedurally proper thing to do would be for that person to ask the chair for that time, really to ask for it in advance. And then you would have X amount of minutes at the end of the agenda to make your response.
I think that's what she's saying, put it on the agenda. I mean, if you go ahead of time, put it on the agenda.
Now, the way of changing that, if y'all want to change it, somebody asked why I how do we do that. The way we change it would have to be changing our procedures, which we normally change in November. Or we changed it in May, this last May. We used to do it in November, moved it back to May because statutes in May, I think. So those could be changed at any time, but that would also take bringing that proposed change, which there's another one I want to do, which is the delegation. We could actually do both at the same time.
I think
It has
that's
to
in board
include-
policy. I think that'll have to go through a policy revision.
That'll have to come before the work session as a recommendation. And
I've got that in my list
And then
of
they
the
vote,
policy pieces, but I gotta take that one through a process, I think, before it comes here.
well, board procedure,
It's in the
I
policy
think
manual.
they have to do the policy too,
would probably needs to be removed from the policy.
probably.
So the recommendation probably needs to be removed and it becomes part of the
I
board
think I
procedure.
still have to take that through the policy revision
Still
remove
have
process.
to do the policy review.
I've got that.
But
I've
the
got it later
recommendation
in
would
my
be to
desk.
remove it, I think, because it's not something that affects, it affects only the procedures of the meeting.
It was designed when the brand new board was formed in the early 80s, it was elected. It was part of a campaign promise that a certain group of folks made. And they made it policy, made it procedure, and they promised it and they delivered it.
So you're saying remove it from policy and put it in the board procedures, or what the procedures are?
Yes.
That makes more sense.
Because the board needs to be able to affect the procedures without going through the system's policy committee or process. I would think, anybody disagrees or not. We don't need everybody else having to waste their time trying to figure out what our procedures are. We'll figure out what our procedures are.
Whatever you said.
Amy.
All right, so is there anyone sitting here, and I'll talk to Judy about this too. Is there anyone sitting here who would oppose removing comments from the regular meeting, but keeping those comments at the work session? I'm not talking about the details of how to get it done, but just in the general theory of that.
I'm good with that, yeah. Can we say?
Yeah, you can say what you would oppose.
I don't oppose. I don't oppose that. I don't want to vote in the work session.
You can't vote in the work
I reserve the right to change my mind.
You can't vote in the work session.
At this minute, I'm okay with
All right. If you have a change of heart, let me know. It'll have to go through the process anyway. It's not just gonna happen. So. Which brings us to
Colors.
comments.